I can recall being in my shower crying, pleading with God, tired of going to womanizing, THC, and everything in between to try to numb myself. Now, y'all been asking me about this defining moment when I finally turned to God. And in this episode, I'm going to share that story. Let's parlay. What's going on, family? Appreciate you tuning in for another episode of Let's Parlay. We are at episode 50. It's crazy to think that I've recorded 50 episodes up until this point. So, very appreciative for all of you who have been tuning in. There's some new subscribers to the page. And if you haven't subscribed already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and appreciate all the support. And that way you can get notified whenever I have a new episode dropping. I just appreciate your time for tuning in. And this has been a topic that I've gotten a couple of comments on the previous episodes about. So people have been asking me about this defining moment when I finally turned to the Lord. Like, what was that like? More specifics around it. I feel like I've shared bits and pieces of that in previous episodes, but today I'm going to do a deep dive into that story. So let's jump right into it. I want to talk about really my journey to faith and then get into that defining moment, because I think some context will be helpful. Because if I just tell you about the defining moment, you're like, okay, well, where were you at with your faith beforehand? So let's start with where my belief came from and what it looked like before this defining moment. So to give you some context, back in 2019, I had come to the altar and I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. At that moment, I didn't really have a clear idea of what that looked like. And maybe I'll retract that statement. I had a pretty good idea, and I knew some people who were within my vicinity who were men of God, who were following through with God's standard, but I did not think that that was attainable for me. I thought that the idea of abstaining before marriage was ludicrous. I literally thought that that just wasn't possible for most men because of our biology and because of what the world had kind of formulated, in my mind about that. And then I also just felt conflicted about like what was normal and normalized in my world versus what the Bible was saying and what the standard really was to be a man of God. So I was aware of the magnitude of the decision, but it still felt like a pretty far fetched idea for me to actually live that out. So my heart was there for the Lord, and I wanted to pursue Him, but I didn't really know what that looked like full and full. So it was, my heart was there, but not 100%. Okay, so that was where I was at back in 2019. And I've been working corporate during that time. I remember I would go to work and I would go out on the weekends because, again, like there was this feeling of sort of emptiness and not feeling fulfilled that I was chasing after. And I didn't necessarily go to the word. I'd always had a pretty solid prayer habit, but I was still 1 foot in, 1 foot out, to be honest with y'all. Like I was 1 foot in the world, 1 foot in my belief and wanting to accept Jesus as Lord. Um, so for me, that period from 2019 all the way up until about towards the end of 2024, I'd been living sort of this double life. And there have been many a moments where I'd really strayed away, where my belief in Jesus was still there, but I still had a lot of questions, and I still wasn't sure about certain what we call like apologetics, right? Where it's essentially like a defense of, your faith in the Lord and your faith in Jesus. And I was just shaky. Like I really didn't have all those questions answered, but I also wasn't seeking them either. And I was concocting my own responses and my own opinions based off of whatever I thought made sense. And that led me down a path of just swaying wherever the wind blew me. My time in Los Angeles, and even a short bit of time before I really committed my life to Christ in Austin, I was just doing what I thought made the most sense. But essentially, I was going to a lot of the things that I would normally go to numb myself. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode. For me, womanizing was a big thing for me. And it wasn't in any sort of like malicious way. And I think any woman who I've ever interacted with will never say that I was like a bad person or anything like that, but my heart wasn't in the right place when I had initiated conversations with women. It was very much an obsession with the flesh and wanting to lead towards sex or something of that nature. So that was what I would go to. That would lead to me going out at night and, essentially being on the hunt and being on the prowl. And then that would cause me to drink, right? And then I would drink and feel terrible the next day. I started feeling all this like anxiety after I would drink as well too. And then in those in between times, I would go to THC, right? Whether it be smoking or whether it be doing edibles. And either it would be to kind of like numb that feeling while I was with women, or while I was by myself to then continue to just entertain myself and distract myself from really that empty feeling and void that it just kept growing and growing and growing. And I remember when I moved from Los Angeles to Austin, I had been speaking to a young lady who I was head over heels for. Like I wanted to do everything to make it work. I was sacrificing all of my own personal ambitions to just make her my mission. And for any guy out there who's ever done that, not a good idea. Okay, that is not a good idea. You should be rooted in the Word and in the Lord first, and then pursuing Him. And if a woman is aligned with you on that, then you guys can work to that together, right? But I just really lost myself in pursuit of her, and then she had decided like, hey, I'm not necessarily down to do this anymore. It was a long distance thing, and from there I just started going back to the things that I felt were familiar, right? Like I said, the womanizing, the THC, etc. Even binge eating was a part of that, and that usually was linked to THC because you get the munchies, etc. So that was a big problem for me, is always going to these things whenever I felt like things weren't going as expected. So I realized that whatever I was doing to numb myself wasn't filling this void. Like I would do those things and it felt good in the moment, but afterwards, I don't know if you felt this, but there's always like this conviction of like kind of feeling disgusted with yourself. Like, why did I just do that? Like, why did I go down that pathway of trying to alleviate whatever it was that I felt by doing this? You know what I mean? And some of it wasn't really like to harm anybody or to try to harm myself, but it was just what felt natural in the moment and what was normalized. So I got to this point where I remember it was the end of 2024 where I just, all those things that I was going to just kept making me feel empty and just worse and worse. And I remember sitting in my shower one day and I just sat in there and cried and was really pleading out to the Lord like, hey God, I think I'm done doing this by myself. I really want to try doing it your way now. Like my heart and my desire is to do that. And it's like, it's the typical, whenever you like people who drink too much, right? And you're super drunk. And in those moments when you're drunk, you say, God, if you let me get past tonight, I'll never drink again. It was similar to that, but it was more serious, right? Like I really wanted to seek the Lord and I really wanted to make some tangible changes. And that's exactly what I did after that moment. Like that was really what shifted everything moving forward, because in Austin, what I then decided to do was, all right, I'm going to commit to the things within my control, reading the Bible, prayer, attending church, but I'm also going to commit to finding and befriending other followers of Christ. Because up until that point, I never really had anybody in my circle who really lived up to that standard. And I knew I needed to normalize the lifestyle and normalize being a man of God. So I knew going to church and finding people who were fighting the same fight, especially men fighting the same fight, was going to be important. So that's what I started to do. And it was a pretty strong shift in my heart. I'll say that it was not perfect. Okay. It's not like from there that defining moment led to, oh, now I'm completely free of any temptation. I'm completely free of any sin. We're never going to be entirely free of sin, right? We're always going to be tempted. To this day, we still sin in various ways. However, I decided I was going to do things differently. So when it came to, courting women and getting to know them, I always had this mindset of like, okay, how is this going to lead to some sort of sexual intimacy? That was always like on the forefront of my mind, and that was a higher priority. And that just dropped to the very bottom. I was like, I really don't want that to be the focal point anymore, because all the relationships and all the women that I've talked to before where I had that approach, it never worked out, and it's not what God says in His Word anyway. So, I went into that mindset, or I went into any sort of interactions with women with that mindset. I tried not to like glorify their flesh, and the crazy part is with me doing that, I winded up like just noticing that women were then more aggressive in wanting to pursue something, like sexual. And I was like, man, this must be like some sort of reverse psychology. And in the wrong hands, this could be very dangerous. But and yeah, and I fell into some of those temptations when it was presented to me. I ain't gonna lie, y'all. Like I still was struggling with figuring out how to say no to those things and how to find women who are actually on the same page. Because I just wasn't looking for the women in the right places. So that was something that I decided to change. And then also, like I said, being in the Word and praying. I had committed from that point forward. After I had that moment in the shower, I was like, I'm going to read the Bible every day. Like, I'm going to make sure that I finish the Bible before the end of 2025. And I found this reading plan that took 358 days to finish the Bible. And I said, all right, I'm going to do this. And again, it wasn't perfect. I had a nice streak of reading the Bible throughout like the first half of the year, but then things got a little shaky when, travel and when things weren't going as expected for me business wise. I started slipping up on my Bible reading habit, but I would always make up for it. I'd always make sure to read the Bible and at least catch up on whatever I'd missed so I can stay on track for my goal. So those were the sort of things that I started doing. And even within the Bible, like, I was gaining understanding. I was learning things that I hadn't necessarily seen before. And I was also seeing trends with a lot of the prominent characters and prominent figures within the Bible around sin, sexual sin being an issue for them and leading to their downfall, around ego being something that always led to their downfall. And I just started to see the mirror put up in front of me where I was like, oh, I'm just like all of these guys. I'm just like Solomon. I'm just like David. I'm just like everybody who's had a struggle between their relationship with the Lord and going to something else instead. I'm no different. And I think for me, it started to cement the idea that we're always going to struggle. And especially you think about the folks in the New Testament, like the apostles after Jesus' resurrection, and now they're spreading the gospel. A lot of them were persecuted. A lot of them went through a really, really tough time preaching and spreading the gospel because there were people who did not want the spread of such good news. And that's something that's a part of every believer's journey is you're going to go through some sort of suffering. Like not everything's going to be sweet after you decide to give yourself to Christ. If anything, it should turn into the opposite. So my heart just changed in a lot of different ways. And like I said, it wasn't perfect. The summer of 2025 was one of my roughest summers when it came to just my self-image and whether I thought I was capable of being an entrepreneur. I think I've mentioned this before, but it was just a rough time for me where I had invested a lot of money into a program that I had started. I'd gotten a lot of interest in that program. I had different issues, like figuring out how to convert that interest into actual clients. I'd hired like 5 people in a month. I'd started investing in ads. All of these things I did within a 4 to 5 week period. And I just did too much too quickly and felt super guilty, felt super unworthy, felt stupid, and was like, why would I ever do such a thing? And that led me down a path of like having resentment towards God, being in this like woe is me sort of mindset. And then I started to resort to those bad habits again. I started to go towards like, oh, I need to be validated by a woman now, or I need to numb myself with THC. That'll make me feel better. Started binge eating and gaining weight and stuff. It just started getting really ugly really quick. But thankfully, the roots and the seeds that were formed at the beginning of the year with me attending church, being around other like-minded believers, those folks helped pull me out. Those folks were the ones who knocked on my door to make sure I was straight when I wasn't responding. Those were the people who, through thick and thin, supported me and knew that I was going through a tough time and knew exactly what to do, to tend to that. So I'm very thankful for that. But that's essentially my defining moment, y'all. Like, it wasn't anything, uh, yeah, it wasn't any sort of crazy climax in my story. It was just, you get to a point eventually where you're kind of disgusted with yourself and you're very convicted about the things that you've been doing that are not in alignment with the word of God, that aren't filling the void. And that's what happened for me. I just kept trying to fill the void with things that were empty within themselves. Things of this world, things that support the flesh, that feel good in the moment, but are going to be, making you feel even worse afterwards. And that was my journey, y'all. Like, it wasn't anything fancy, and it also wasn't perfect after that defining moment. And at the end of 2025, I had done a reflection and assessed. I was like, man, I made such an improvement this year. I was more intentional about reading the Bible. I finished the Bible after 2025. I prayed consistently. I found like-minded believers who I can lock arms with. I attended church more than I ever had. I'd done all these things to grow in my relationship with the Lord, and I got tested for sure. And within that test, it was an opportunity for me to either lean more towards the Lord or lean more towards what I was used to. And unfortunately, I decided to lean towards those older things. But because of the work that I had done earlier that year, there was a support system that brought me back to God. And I'm very appreciative of that. So at the end of 2025, I decided, you know what? I need to publicly proclaim that I am removing these things that have always led to my downfall. I don't want to have sex before marriage. I don't even want that thought. I need to publicly proclaim that. I don't want to have anything to do with THC. It always leads me down the route of either binge eating, masturbation, or wanting to, womanize or whatever have you. And then alcohol. I said, I'm done with alcohol, because then that leads me to a point where I'm like, there's no reason to go out. And then if I do go out and someone presents it to me, then I have the freedom in saying no. Like, the feeling of having to decide between whether I should or I shouldn't, that you become a slave to that moment. And I realized that, man, like, I just want the freedom of saying I'm standing firm on this and not pursuing any of that. So yeah, at the end of 2025, that's what I decided. And ever since then, y'all, I've never felt at so much peace. That defining moment at the end of 2024 led to a year of a change in heart, a change in commitment, a change in habits, not perfection, but then it led to ultimately realizing, okay, here's what I need to remove so that I can actually be locked in with the Lord. And we are recording this in the end of May. And right now, I mean, it's been 210 days since I've either masturbated or had sex with anybody. And that's the longest I've ever gone without that. And yes, it is possible for the fellas who are watching this. It is very possible. And then on top of that, I think it's been almost 180 days since I've had a drink or any THC. So I'm very proud of how far I've come and those streaks and whatnot. And I don't share this to try to like tell you that I'm holier than thou. I'm just sharing this with y'all to let y'all know it's possible and that it's not some sort of far-fetched thing. Like, whatever you've been told by society or the world or friends or family about, like, oh my God, like, no, it's in your nature to do these things. Like, you need your vices. You need to, get one off or something. That's all a lie. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. And the great thing is that there's been so many other areas of my life that are greater than they ever have been before. Greater than they ever have before. And especially when it comes to my relationships, especially when it comes to the feeling I get of serving others, and even just my internal peace and just knowing that God is going to provide and God loves me more than anything. And knowing that I'm living righteously. I don't feel any guilt about anything. Like I'm just doing whatever the Lord calls me to do. And that's a very freeing feeling. And I pray that everybody gets to have the opportunity to say that at some point. If you can't right now, that's okay. And the Lord is going to work on your heart whenever that time is right for you, because your days have already been ordained in his book. Like you were born to fulfill what he's already done. So if you don't know when that time is coming, or if you feel like, man, I don't feel like that's ever going to be me, just have belief that it will. And whatever that timing looks like, you'll know, and you'll feel pretty firm in that decision of committing yourself to him. And I just pray that for all of y'all, because I have so much peace and so much peace and purpose as a result of that. So that's my defining moment, y'all. I hope that answers your question. If there's any other topics that y'all like me to talk about, please let me know. We got a whole half of the year to continue to chat and build upon what we build upon already. And I'm excited to talk to y'all about some updates and what's happening in my life. Obviously, I shared a lot in the last episode. So if there's any follow-up questions on that, I'm happy to answer. But all the people who have recently subscribed, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Hopefully you're enjoying the content. And yeah, if anything, we're going to catch each other next week for the next episode of Let's Parlay. Subscribe if you haven't already. And may the Lord bless you in everything that you do. I pray that my testimony just allows you to realize that it's very much possible for you. You don't have to do this alone. Jesus died on the cross and was resurrected 3 days later for us. He went through hell for us and for you. And that was the ultimate gift, man, the ultimate gift. And realizing the power of that has freed me a lot. And I just pray that everybody under the sound of my voice becomes more curious about that and starts to do your own investigation and research into what that all entails and what does that actually mean for you as an individual, and just test it, like go ahead and, I mean, once you start going down the apologetics route, you get a lot of questions answered that most people have, but you got to search, your heart's got to be curious about it. Anyway, that's enough of my soapbox about apologetics. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next week. Take care. God bless.